Hi, I'm Desiree. Welcome to my dark happy place. Thanks for joining me today. I'm so glad you made it. Welcome to episode number 6. Today I have a pretty shocking case for you guys. The details of this one are not things that you hear about every day. If you've ever heard of this case before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So we're just going to kind of dive into it. Cue the trigger warning.
Today's episode is intended for mature audiences only. The topic today contains real events that happened to real people. There will be graphic descriptions of very sensitive subjects, such as domestic violence and extreme child cruelty, resulting in infant death. Listener discretion is advised.
All right, with all that being said, let's get into the case of Paris Talley. Paris Nevaeh Talley was born August 2nd of 2005 to Terrell Talley and China Arnold. I didn't see much information about Terrell, but China was born on March 29, 1980, which made her 25 years old when Paris was born. China and Terrell lived together in an apartment on Hall Avenue at Parkside Homes in Dayton, Ohio, with their 4 children. There were 3 boys, ages 8, 6, and 3, and then there was baby Paris. The boys were all from previous relationships, so baby Paris was the only one that this couple shared together. On August 29th, 2005, China and Terrell were just kind of looking to get out of the house, get away from the kids, have some adult time, so his sister Leonda offered to watch the kids for them. China and Terrell left the apartment that night about 6:30, 7 o'clock, and they went to a park to hang out and relax, and they brought a bottle of liquor with them, Bacardi 151, that they would sip on and drink while they were hanging out. They'd nearly finished the bottle, and China was pretty drunk. After the alcohol started kicking in, an argument broke out. The topic? Who's Paris's real dad? So Terrell had been hearing some rumors that China had had some alone time with another guy and that he might not be Paris's dad. Before China got pregnant, she'd been enrolled at Sinclair Community College to be a counselor. The rumor when she was there was that she and one of the other guys at the school were messing around, and after she got pregnant, that rumor then turned into, well, he's the dad, not Terrell. During the argument, the two ended up getting in the car to head back to the apartment, and China got behind the wheel to drive. She was driving very recklessly, way beyond the speed limit, and Terrell was yelling at her to calm down, drive better, and that just made the argument spiral even farther. Thankfully, they did make it back to the apartment safe, and witnesses said that China was barely able to walk and talk when they got back there. Like, that's how drunk she was while she was driving. Quick PSA, don't drink and drive. It's not cute. It's not worth it. Don't do it. Call an Uber. Call a friend. Okay? Okay. After they got back to the complex, the fight ended up escalating beyond words, and it turned physical. Terrell slapped China and pushed her to the ground, but he says he only did it because she bit his lip. After Terrell pushed China, the argument was no longer physical, according to the witnesses, and it kind of turned into just a screaming match. At some point during the screaming match, Terrell confessed to China that he had cheated with a neighbor. China went to the apartment to relieve Leonda of her babysitting duties, and Leonda took her kids home and put them to bed. Terrell didn't go back to the apartment with China. Instead, he went with a neighbor, Jason Strouff, to an apartment that was nicknamed the Bootleg. When they got to the Bootleg, they bought some beer and they took it back to Jason's porch and they sat and drank it together. After Leonda put her kids to bed, she went back over to China's to see what was happening, if the couple had calmed down, and as Leonda was walking that way, she saw China was trying to get back into the car to drive off again. Leonda stopped her and offered to drive instead, so she took China on a short little drive. They got some cigarettes, and on the way back to the apartment, China was really feeling the liquor, and she had Leonda pull over so that she could puke. The entire trip from the time that Leonda saw China getting into the car until they got back to the complex was about 40 minutes. Leonda helped China get back into an apartment. Terrell went to a different apartment in the complex called The Spot. The Spot was a place where drugs like crack and weed were sold. While Terrell was at The Spot, he asked Leonda if she could go by his apartment again to check on China and the kids for him. She said yes, she would, so at about 11:45 p.m., she went to check and said everything seemed normal, locked up the house, and took the key back over to Terrell. Leonda had taken a woman with her named Marcelina Perry, and both of them said that China was asleep on the couch and Paris was asleep in a car seat by a different couch. Terrell got home from the spot at about 5:36 in the morning, and he says he saw China asleep on the couch and Paris asleep in her car seat next to the other couch, just like Leonda had described it, and he ended up then going to bed. China got up to get her boys ready for school, and Terrell got up to get baby Paris. That's when he found Paris stiff and cold with what looked like a red bruise mark on her face. China and Terrell rushed Paris to the Children's Medical Center at 7:15 a.m. When Paris was brought in, her temperature was 95 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 35 degrees Celsius. She had no pulse, and she was not breathing. Hospital staff tried to resuscitate her, and while they were working on her, they determined that she had been burned. The doctors told China and Terrell about their discovery, and China was just shouting back at them saying they were wrong. She said that Paris wasn't burned and that her skin was just peeling. Why would a baby's skin just start peeling? I mean, usually it's from like an injury or health disorder or, I don't know, maybe a burn. It doesn't just like peel off for no reason. Emergency room physician Dr. William Matre said he was disgusted with how China was acting, like she couldn't tell that Paris had been burned. After about 15 minutes of trying to resuscitate Paris, she was pronounced dead at only 28 days old. That poor baby. Terrell was immediately upset and crying and demanding to know what had happened to his baby girl because China was the main caretaker the night before. The hospital staff thought that, given her injuries, it was strange that Paris was in a clean nightgown. That signaled to the staff that this wasn't an accident. This was intentional. The staff believed that this was not an accident because if she'd been burned in the gown she was brought in to the hospital in, there would have been peeled skin and seepage from her wounds on it. But it was clean, meaning she would have been changed after she was burned. So because baby Paris died under what the staff considered to be suspicious circumstances, the police were obviously notified. The police searched the home looking for anything they could find that might have burned Paris. While they were searching the apartment, Detective Doyle Burke found a little plastic baby bathtub in the bathroom with water in it and what he considered skin-like sediment at the bottom. There was also a damp towel that had the same sediment on it in the bathroom by the tub. After testing, the skin-like translucent material that was found in that plastic baby tub was determined to be from baby Paris. Terrell and China were taken to the police station for further questioning. Terrell told police that he'd gotten home from the spot at about 3 to 4 in the morning, which was a slightly different time than had previously been stated. He said that he laid on the love seat in the living room when he got there, and a little bit later he moved over to the couch China was sleeping on and laid by her. He said that when he got up in the morning, he saw Paris face down on the couch in the corner. How'd she get to the couch? She was in her car seat, wasn't she? I mean, she obviously didn't walk there. She was 28 days old. So who put her there? That's a little strange, right? Terrell said that when he noticed Paris on the couch, he went over to check on her and noticed she was lifeless. So Terrell's story, pretty straightforward, right? He got home, saw them both asleep, laid down next to China, woke up in the morning. Paris is on the couch now somehow. He notices she's lifeless. China's story changes quite a bit. When she started talking to police, she said that her and Terrell had gone out the night before, that they'd gotten drunk and were arguing. She said that she got home at about 2 a.m. and she tried to feed Paris a bottle, but that Paris wouldn't eat. She said she noticed Paris was warm, so she put her in the bassinet and put a fan on her. She said that when she got up in the morning, Paris wasn't acting right. She got her other kids ready for school, dropped them off, and then her and Terrell brought Paris to the hospital. Police said, no, that doesn't make sense. We know Leonda was there the night before. We know you didn't get home at 2 a.m. What's the deal? She goes, oh, yeah. Actually, I'd gotten home between 9:30, 10 o'clock. China told police that after she got home and Leonda left, she fed Paris a bottle and fell asleep with her on her chest. Police were like, but I thought you said you put her in a bassinet because she was warm. And she goes, oh, yeah, I did. I actually put her in a bassinet because she was warm and I put the fan on her. China then says that at about 2:30 in the morning, Paris woke up crying, and so she got up to make her a bottle in the microwave because she was hungry. After she fed Paris, China says she changed her diaper and then laid back down on the couch with her on her chest again. China said earlier in the morning, before they were at the hospital, that she'd woken up and found Paris wasn't lying by her anymore and that she wasn't sure where Paris was, but she just figured she was upstairs in her bassinet, so she wasn't worried about it. She said that instead of Paris being by her, Terrell was taking her spot on the couch. Police kept questioning China and asked her, hey, were you outside at any point? And she said no. They're like, oh, well, witnesses in the area of your apartment say they saw you outside at 4 a.m. She says, oh yeah, I was outside waiting for Terrell to come home. He had Paris with him. He took her with him after the argument when he left the apartment. She said that when Terrell came back with Paris to the apartment, that's when she saw that Paris was actually burned. Again, didn't make sense to police. Why didn't she mention that Terrell had taken her? She said she'd fed her a bottle at 2 a.m. In all of her other stories, Paris was home with her. They also questioned, well, if she came back burned, why didn't you say anything? Why were you acting at the hospital like she wasn't? Police asked China, well, if that's the case, what were the next steps after he came home and you found out that she was burned? And of course, she had no answer. Nothing she was saying up until this point was true. None of it makes any sense. Police asked China about the tub that they found in the bathroom with the skin-like sediment in it, and China said that she'd given Paris a bath about 12 noon the day before, the day that they had gone to the park, but that she hadn't emptied the water out. A normal bath isn't going to cause skin to peel off like that. I'm willing to bet that Paris was washed after she was burned, and that's why the skin was peeled off like that in the tub. China was arrested because she was the one at home when Paris was injured, and because her story changed and was not making any sense to the police. They didn't have any concrete evidence, though, that she was at fault for Paris's burns and her death, so China was released a few days later. Terrell was never arrested in relation to Paris's death. His story seemed fairly legit, except for the one little discrepancy of time, but that late at night after you've been drinking and stuff, you might mix up 4 a.m. and 5 a.m. It's a pretty easy thing to do on a normal day. Russell Upgrove, the Montgomery County Coroner's Office pathologist, did the autopsy on baby Paris. He said that Paris had died sometime between 1 and 3:15 a.m. on August 30th, 2005. Upgrove didn't have any idea what could have caused the burns, but decided that the cause of death was due to elevated temperature caused by thermal injuries. He was able to tell that the burns baby Paris had were not normal burns like you get from touching a hot pan or boiling water or something like that. These were not external burns like blisters. They were all internal. An internal burn's more like an electrical burn. There's like a spot on your skin or something where the point of contact was, but the internal burn and damage can be much bigger than is like seen from the surface of the skin. In Paris's case, there was no external point of contact. There were just areas that were kind of bruised looking and red spots where you could see that the skin had been burnt from the inside. He found that her internal burns were extensive and guessed that before she died, Paris reached an internal temperature of 107 to 108 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 42 degrees Celsius. In 2006, the burns on baby Paris were determined to be from a microwave. It was determined that 28-day-old Paris Talley had been burned in a microwave, essentially cooked from the inside out. The way that they determined that a microwave was used to burn and kill baby Paris was because there was news from another incident of this, a mother from Virginia named Elizabeth Renee Oddie, who had burned her 5-week-old baby boy, Joseph Louis Martinez, in a microwave back in 1999. That news came to the attention of the investigators, and with that news resurfacing, it sparked questions in Paris's case. The burn patterns between the two babies were very similar. Because of this new information and the similarities in the cases, on May 18th of 2006, police went to the apartment where Paris had died to search it again. When they looked the first time, they never suspected the microwave. Who would expect some person to put a baby in a microwave? No normal fucking person would put a baby in a microwave. The police found that the apartment had been abandoned. China had moved shortly after being released from police custody, but luck was on the police side because, ta-da, microwave was still there. Based on the size of the microwave, they believed that Paris definitely would have fit inside. The burns on Paris were on her face, the front of her arms, her legs, her chest, her stomach. Looking at the fact that the heating element was at the top of the microwave, they were able to conclude that baby Paris had been put in the microwave on her back, face up. The microwave was swabbed, looking for DNA to prove their theory, and the source of the DNA from inside of the microwave was found to match baby Paris. After that discovery, China was rearrested on November 27, 2006 for aggravated murder. Her bond was set at $1 million. Ken Betts, director of the Montgomery County Coroner's Office, said, quote, "We have reason to believe, and we have some forensic evidence that is consistent with our belief, that a microwave oven was used in this death," unquote. The media had a field day with this and immediately started trying to paint China as this horrible person before she was even convicted. China had a previous criminal history, which didn't help her case in some people's eyes. Her 2 previous convictions were one for abduction and one for forgery. In 2000, China was convicted of abducting a 72-year-old lady from a mall parking lot. She supposedly demanded this lady's purse and pulled a gun and made this woman drive her downtown. China said she never asked for the woman's purse and also never had a gun. She said she just wanted to scare the woman so that she'd give her a ride. She claims to have told the woman that she wouldn't hurt her and even showed her that the gun was not actually a gun and it was just a bottle of lotion stuffed in a glove. In 2002, China was convicted of forgery. I don't have the details on that case, but in both instances, she was given 5 years of probation. People were claiming that this past history showed she was 100% guilty of killing Paris. How could someone be innocent if they had any prior convictions? I mean, I think that's kind of a stretch. People do dumb shit all the time. It doesn't mean they're going to kill someone. China's lawyer, John Paul Ryan, said the same thing, that the convictions had no connection to the current charges at hand. In December of 2006, China was indicted for aggravated murder. During the pre-trial, Dayton Police Detective Mike Galbraith said that China told him, quote, "If I just had not gotten so drunk, I guess my baby wouldn't have died," unquote. China's trial started in January of 2008, and she pled not guilty. Prosecution tried to include experiments that used cow brains and chicken torsos to replicate the effects of what happened to Paris in the microwave. Defense pathologist George Nichols argued the experiments weren't going to be helpful because chickens and babies have different body structures. Judge John Kessler denied the experiments to be part of evidence because of the different body structure and also because they weren't exactly sure how long Paris was in the microwave. It was estimated to be over 2 minutes, but I mean, there's no way to know for sure, so how are they able to conduct an experiment to try and replicate a result that they don't have details for? For reference, in Baby Joseph's case from 1999, he was estimated to have been in the microwave for over 10 minutes before he passed, which is a huge difference in time. Based on those issues with the experiments, they were ruled to not be helpful to the jury and were not allowed to be in the trial. While China was in jail waiting for her trial to begin, she started to get close to her cellmate, a woman named Linda Williams. Linda had since been released from jail, but she was called to testify against China during the trial. Linda testified that China had confessed to her about killing baby Paris. Linda said she told her, quote, "I wrapped her up, I put her in the microwave, I turned the microwave on, and I went outside. She fit right in," unquote. She said China's reason was because she was scared Terrell would leave her if he found out Paris was not his. So you just decided to kill her. That was so much better than losing Terrell. To kill your baby. Terrell testified that China had confessed to him as well, and he said that while he was on a phone call with her, she told him that if he hadn't cheated on her, that Paris would be alive. Near the end of the trial, during the closing statements, new evidence was presented in the form of a surprise witness. Since these are children, I'm just going to be making up names so that we can keep track of who's who. A boy named Michael claimed that he saw Leonda's son, David, put Paris in the microwave. Apparently, David had a history of putting things like dolls and even cats into the microwave. Judge Kessler listened to what Michael had to say, and on January 28th of 2008, a mistrial was declared. Someone else being introduced as a possible suspect, child or not, was definitely enough to cast doubt as to China's guilt. A retrial took place in August of 2008. Prosecution subpoenaed Linda to testify again, but she didn't show. Turns out that after she testified in the first trial, she went into hiding. The reason was because her boyfriend at the time was totally against her testifying, and he was abusive towards her, and so she was trying to get away from him. During the trial, the state was paying for her to stay in a motel so that she could be safe, And after the mistrial, the boyfriend was arrested for an unrelated reason. So once he was no longer a threat to her, the state stopped paying for her to be in hiding. Linda was upset and threatened to go to China's lawyer and say that she'd lied before and was actually going to try and help China get out of jail now. Investigator Gary Ware had contacted Linda on multiple occasions and kept getting the runaround. She had moved, and so he tried having authorities go to her last known address, but she wasn't there. Linda did talk to Investigator Ware one more time and said that she'd come into the prosecutor's office, but never showed up. Eventually, he stopped looking for her and a warrant for a material witness was issued. When it was time for trial, Linda was listed as unavailable, and in place of her in-person testimony, a video of her previous testimony from the first trial was played for the jury. China's family members testified on her behalf at this trial. They testified that China was a wonderful mother and that she was ecstatic about having a daughter. Montgomery County Assistant Prosecutor Daniel Brandt said there was no way that this was an accident. He said there were too many steps that would have had to take place for baby Paris to be cooked in the microwave accidentally. He said that China or whoever did it would have had to take Paris, put her in, close the door, push the buttons to set the time, turn it on, wait until the time finished, take her back out, and redress her. Assistant Prosecutor Brandt said that even if David had put baby Paris in the microwave, he probably wouldn't have thought to redress her. I mean, he was a kid. He said that even if David had done it, China was the only adult at home, so ultimately the responsibility of these children fell on her. On September 8th of 2008, the jury deliberated for 3.5 hours and came back with a decision that China was guilty. As for her sentence, the jury had been given 3 options: death, life without parole, and life with parole possible after 25 to 30 years. The jury couldn't come to a decision as to the sentence, so the judge decided that China would be sentenced to life without parole. A judge can't, I believe in most states and cases, can't give the death penalty unless the jury recommends it to the judge. China showed little emotion when her verdict was read, but later on she sobbed as she was being led out of the courtroom. Her lawyer submitted a motion for a new trial, but that was denied. Now, even though she didn't get a new trial, that doesn't mean she doesn't get appeals. One of her appeals ended up working for her, and on November 5th of 2010, China's conviction was reversed. After the Ohio Court of Appeals looked at China's appeal, they agreed there had been prosecutorial misconduct and error in excluding the testimony of a witness. A fellow inmate named Kyra Wood was not brought in to testify on China's behalf in the previous trial. Kyra claimed that China told her she wasn't sure who'd placed Paris in the microwave. David, the boy who was accused of being the possible culprit, was not called to the stand during that trial either. Of the two, I feel like having David testify would have been the most necessary. I mean, in the retrial, Michael had testified, so why wouldn't they call up the person they were saying did it? Getting David's version of events could have been helpful and might have actually helped China's case. Kyra's statement might not have helped that much because if a bunch of people are saying one thing and you have one differing story, most people don't put too much thought into that different story, So I definitely feel like David was the one that should have been up there more so than Kyra. On top of the 2 witnesses, the appeal court ruled that the video of Linda's testimony should not have been allowed. There's something that's called the right of confrontation. This means the defendant has the right to face the witness, and there's also a right to have a witness cross-examined. By playing the video of her testimony, they can't do that. You can't look at a TV screen and ask questions and get new answers. There might have been new questions that were planned by the defense, and they weren't given an opportunity to be answered. After the reversal, a 3rd trial took place in April of 2011. Because China had already been convicted of this crime before, there was a question as to whether there would be double jeopardy. After looking at everything, the decision was that the double jeopardy did not apply and the death penalty was back on the table. From what I looked up, the reason for that is because double jeopardy does not apply to mistrials or sentences that were overturned unless it was for insufficient evidence. Since this was for prosecutorial errors, it means that it's fine. According to the Supreme Court, quote, "There is no double jeopardy bar to retrying a defendant who has succeeded in overturning his conviction. The court stated that this rule rests on the premise that the original conviction had been nullified and the slate wiped clean, unquote. Dr. Upgrove testified about his finding during Paris's autopsy. A woman named Marcelo Fierro, a retired chief medical examiner for Virginia, also testified. Dr. Fierro was the one who had handled baby Joseph's case. She testified and agreed with all of Upgrove's findings based on her prior experience with a case like this. Jurors were shown pictures of both baby Paris and baby Joseph, and that had to be terrible to look at these two babies. I bet those jurors still have those images in their brain. Kim Snyder, a patient care assistant at the hospital where Paris had been taken, testified that she was surprised when China started yelling about Paris not being burned. She claimed she never heard anyone ask China about the burns. Kim also said that China didn't seem drunk and that she seemed like a grieving mom. 2 inmates, Ashley Schock and Janine Bradley, were housed with China and said that during an altercation, China was called a baby killer and responded with, "I didn't mean to do it." 2 others, Kimberly Hunter and Sierra Lowe, testified on China's behalf, saying they didn't hear that during the altercation or any of the statements Ashley and Janine claimed that China said. Testimony from at least 5 defense witnesses said that David had admitted to putting Paris in the microwave because she was crying after his mom, Leonda, walked out of the room. Again, we're going to be talking about children, so I'm going to use made-up names. One boy, Tony, was prominent because he said that David told him directly he put Paris in the microwave when Leonda left the room. Another, a man named Keith Boykin, told Terrell about a conversation where the kids named David as the killer. Keith told Terrell, and Terrell said he knew David was bad, but didn't think he would hurt Paris. Officers had interviewed the witnesses, but all of them denied those statements, and David even recanted, saying he never made any of the statements about hurting Paris. Even if David had done it, he would have had to put Paris in the microwave before Leonda left, and before China and Terrell got back. When they got back, they didn't notice anything wrong with Paris, so that kind of rules that out. The only way he could have done it after his mom left was to sneak back over there in the middle of the night between 1 and 3 a.m., and that just doesn't make any sense. China's lawyer tried to say that Terrell was a violent, jealous man, and that he could have just as easily been the one who had placed Paris in the microwave. A man named Robert Copeland testified that Terrell was at the spot during the time Paris was suspected to have been burned, so there's no way he could have done it. If the timeline's correct and he didn't get home till 3 o'clock or later, there's no way he could have done it either, because Paris was determined to have been killed between 1 and 3, so he wouldn't have been home. Even during China's story, she said she was waiting outside for Terrell to get home at 4 a.m., and witnesses confirmed that she was home alone at 4 a.m. China's attorney tried to argue that she was so drunk that she blacked out and wasn't aware what was happening. Entirely possible, right? She was super drunk. She was throwing up. She could have blacked out. I mean, even if she blacked out, who in the fuck puts a baby in a microwave? Plenty of people get blackout drunk all the time. They're not putting babies in the microwave. But his defense for why this happened, his defense is so ludicrous. Yeah, he's trying to get his client off of these charges. He's trying to get her out. But these are what you decided to go with? He tried to say that China just made a mistake. She accidentally put Paris in the microwave instead of her bottle. When I read that, I literally couldn't understand why he thought that was a good defense, why that made any sense. I get it. She's drunk. She might have blacked out. But if she had the sense to realize her baby was crying, to get up, get the bottle, scoop the powder, add the water, shake it, and get to the microwave, no problem, and then put the baby in instead, there's no way. I see no way she could have mixed the two up. He then said something almost just as ludicrous. He said that she just didn't really realize how a microwave worked, that she didn't realize it actually made heat, and that she thought it was just energy. He said she didn't realize that it would hurt Paris, that she'd only planned to put her in there for a few minutes. That's your defense? That she didn't think that putting her in the microwave would hurt her? She just planned to put her baby in the microwave for a few minutes because she didn't know how it worked. Where the fuck did this guy get his damn degree? I mean, he's really trying. But who would believe that? Obviously, the jury thought those defense arguments were so fucking stupid also that on May 13th of 2011, they again found China guilty of aggravated murder in a unanimous decision after 7 hours of deliberation. Before sentencing, China's sister Michelle Wilkinson begged for her mercy in hopes that she wouldn't get the death sentence. Sentencing was put on hold for a little bit so that a psychological evaluation could be done on China. There were 3 different evaluations. 2 out of the 3 doctors said China had an average IQ and had no significant mental illness. The third, Dr. Jeffrey Smolian, said that she suffered from a low-grade chronic depressive condition, as well as alcohol and drug abuse. Aside from that, nothing really stood out as a reason to justify the death of Paris. In baby Joseph's case, his mom suffered from a medical condition that caused seizures and blackouts, so that played a part in her case. In China's case, there was none of that. One of the defense attorneys, Kevin Lennon, said that the death penalty should only go out to the worst offenders. I'm sorry, Mr. Lennon. Is that not what this is? Is cooking your baby in a microwave not one of the worst offenses? Assistant Prosecutor Brandt told the juries that China's actions were even more purposeful than a slaying with a gun or a knife because she had to stuff Paris into the microwave, shut the door, press the buttons, wait at least 2 minutes before taking her out. On May 20th of 2011, China was again given the sentence of life without parole. After her sentencing, China's family was outraged. They claimed she didn't get a fair trial because there was an alternate juror who had been released shortly before the end of the trial. This juror had been talking about their feelings on the case and whether or not she thought China was guilty before the deliberation was even set to begin. There's speculation that her opinions could have swayed other jurors. Apparently, there was no mention of this juror being released by the judge, and that was seen as suspicious by the family. The person wasn't an official juror, it's an alternate juror. That's like if one of the 12, the official 12 jury members, gets sick or has to be removed, the alternate juror takes their place. They sit through the whole trial because they obviously have to know what's going on in case they are brought in at any point. They are subject to the same rules and guidelines as official jurors are, which means they're not supposed to discuss the case or their opinions on it at any point until the deliberation happens. It is a little strange that there was no mention of this in court, but I'm not really familiar with that process, so I can't really say if anything sketchy was happening or if they just got rid of that one because they still had all the main jurors, you know? An appeal was filed by China's new lawyer, Christopher Thompson, in September of 2013. In December of 2013, her appeal was denied and her conviction was upheld. Another appeal was filed by attorney Stephen Hardwick, stating that her case was violating double jeopardy. The appeal asked the Ohio Supreme Court to send her case back for resentencing. In May of 2014, the Ohio Supreme Court decided not to take her case. I mean, it makes sense they wouldn't. That was already considered before she went into her third trial. Montgomery County Prosecutor Matt Heck Jr. said in a written statement, quote, "This defendant was found guilty by 24 jurors during 2 separate jury trials. With today's decision by the Ohio Supreme Court declining to accept her final appeal, we hope that finally this horrifying case is closed and the defendant will serve the rest of her life in prison for murdering her own 28-day-old baby girl in a microwave oven," unquote. China's currently serving out her sentence at the Dayton Correctional Facility. The housing complex that they lived in has since been demolished after it was bought in December of 2006 by a development company. For those of you who have been wondering, well, was Terrell Paris's real dad? A DNA test was done after her death, and it was revealed that, in fact, Terrell was Paris's father. So that's it. That's the case. That's all the information I have for you on the death of baby Paris Talley. You can find the podcast on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook at Dark Happy Pod. I'll be posting pictures on Instagram so that you can see who I talked about today. You'll be able to find this and all future episodes on Spotify. I'm hoping that I have the Apple issue worked out by now. If I don't, sorry, I'm working my hardest to get that back up and going because I know that's where a lot of people usually listen to this. And if it's not, you are able to find the podcast everywhere else, Spotify, YouTube, Audible, any of those major places. You can also find it on the website at mydarkhappyplace.com. I always have it embedded on the main page and on the episodes page. The newest one is always there. And remember, on December 26th, there will be no episode, so don't look for one that day. I'll be back after the new year on January 2nd with a new episode. I'll be here next week with another episode, so be ready and mark it down on your calendars. Bye!